Imagine a clay granary in the middle of the night. Inside, an entire season's work sits in the dark. Wheat, barley, lentils. Months of planting, cutting, carrying, and drying. All packed into sacks that can be torn open by a pair of teeth. Then you hear it. Scratching. A mouse bites through the fibers. One opening becomes another. One mouse becomes 5, then 20, then a colony living inside the food meant to carry an entire family through winter. And somewhere beneath the roof, 2 amber eyes blink open. The first cities had walls. They had armed guards. They had laws, punishments, and people whose job was to protect what mattered. Yet part of their most valuable property was defended by an animal that took no orders, wore no uniform, and could disappear whenever it felt like it. A cat. Wait, how did that happen? Did an ancient farmer spot a wild predator and think, "Perfect, you're on the night shift"? Not a pet. Not yet. A partner. Humans offered warmth, shelter, and prey. Cats brought patience, claws, and silence. Neither side controlled the arrangement. So how did a solitary wild hunter become civilization's smallest security guard without humans ever fully taming it? The moment people began storing food, they created something the old hunting camps had never offered on this scale. A permanent buffet. And almost none of the guests were invited. Grain drew beetles. Waste drew insects. Grain and insects drew mice. The mice ate supplies, spoiled what they did not eat, and multiplied behind the same walls humans had built to keep danger outside. Agriculture solved one survival problem, then quietly created another. So the evolutionary question was not simply, what animal can kill a mouse? That part was easy. Owls could do it, snakes could do it, weasels could do it. The harder question was, what predator was bold enough to enter a human settlement, calm enough to live within a few steps of people, and still wild enough to hunt after dark without being told? That is a strange combination. Close, but not dependent. Tolerant, but not obedient. Useful, but still dangerous. There was no interview. No leash. No promise that either side would stay. Humans created concentrated food, warm hiding places, and an endless stream of prey. Certain wildcats were willing to tolerate the smoke, the shouting, the footsteps, and the eyes watching them from across the fire. Agriculture created the vacancy before humans even noticed the applicant. Now imagine Cyprus around 7,500 BCE. A small boat is crossing the eastern Mediterranean, low in the water and crowded with everything needed to begin again on an island. Stone tools, seeds, food, animals. Goats can be tied down. Sheep can be managed. They may struggle, but humans understand what to do with them. Then, somewhere on that boat, there is a small feline predator. A creature with claws. A creature that climbs. A creature that does not respond to being packed away like cargo. And it should not be there. Cats were not native to Cyprus, so if a feline reached the island, someone had to bring it across open water. At Chilarocambos, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a cat buried near a human. The two bodies were separated by only about 40 centimeters. And this burial is thousands of years older than the famous images of cats from pharaonic Egypt. 40 centimeters. Close enough to make you wonder. Someone had given that animal space on a boat. Someone had fed it during the journey. Someone had accepted the risk of carrying teeth and claws into a crowded vessel surrounded by frightened livestock. But why? Was this cat already a companion? Was it brought along to hunt rodents around the new settlement? Did it hold some ritual meaning? Was it connected to status, protection, or belief? Maybe it was all of those things. The honest answer is that we cannot know. Bones can preserve distance. They cannot preserve affection. A burial may show that an animal mattered, but it cannot tell us exactly how. Still, one fact refuses to disappear. Before the cat became a permanent resident of the human home, humans had already made it a passenger. The relationship crossed the sea before it crossed the doorway. Now travel east to Quanhukun, a farming village in China around 3300 BCE. Millet grows in the fields surrounding the settlement. After the harvest, grain spills near houses, storage pits, and work areas. To a farmer, those loose seeds are waste. To a rodent, they are dinner. When darkness falls, mice move between the walls. They squeeze through cracks, climb into storage spaces, and feed on calories gathered by human hands. And then another hunter begins showing up. The leopard cat. Small, spotted, native to Asia. It was not the ancestor of the domestic cat curled up on modern sofas. But archaeological evidence suggests that these wild felines had entered the food web created by the village. The system was almost absurdly simple. Humans grew millet, rodents ate the millet, leopard cats ate the rodents. 3 species, tied together by a relationship none of them had planned. Researchers studying animal remains and chemical signatures found evidence consistent with leopard cats living near the settlement and feeding on prey drawn into the village. One individual may even have eaten food more directly connected to humans, although the exact nature of that connection remains uncertain. Wait, does that mean people in ancient China domesticated a separate species of cat? Not quite. There is no clear reason to imagine villagers selecting kittens, controlling breeding, or intentionally building a pet population. What may have existed was something less organized and, in a way, more interesting. Wild hunters kept coming back because humans kept producing prey. No one needed to teach a leopard cat how to stalk a mouse. No one needed to explain the job. The village did the recruiting. The grain was the advertisement. The mice were the salary. And the leopard cat showed up for the night shift. That matters because the same ecological vacancy could appear wherever humans stored food in one place. Different villages could attract different small predators. Similar human problems could produce similar partnerships, even when those partnerships involved completely different feline lineages. For a while, the arrangement at Quanhukun appears to have worked. People faced pressure from fewer rodents. Leopard cats gained a dependable hunting ground. Neither side had to understand the bargain. They only had to benefit from it. But this particular experiment did not produce the lineage that later spread through Africa, Europe, and eventually the rest of the world. Modern domestic cats descend primarily from a different wildcat population farther west.
The job appeared more than once.
Not every feline employee stayed. So follow the story west and south, toward the Nile. Here, descendants of the African wildcat encountered something irresistible: human settlements surrounded by fields, livestock, irrigation channels, houses, and grain stores. The Nile made farming productive. Productive farms filled granaries. Full granaries drew rodents. And, once again, the hunters came after them. At first, a wildcat near a storehouse may have been tolerated for one brutally practical reason. It was useful. It did not eat the grain. It ate the thing eating the grain. Almost perfect. But these cats were not obedient workers. They still entered when they chose, left when they chose, fought, mated, hunted, and ignored whatever humans wanted from them. That independence did not ruin the arrangement. It shaped it. The cats least frightened by people gained access to prey, warmth, and shelter. Humans were more likely to tolerate cats that hunted rodents rather than attacking chickens or causing trouble around the household. And with each generation, the distance became a little smaller, closer to the storehouse, closer to the doorway, closer to the family, closer to the human imagination. By the 2nd and 1st millennia BCE, cats were appearing in Egyptian domestic scenes, religious practices, and symbolic life. They were no longer just shapes moving through the shadows beside the grain. They became associated with protection, fertility, motherhood, and order within the home. Think about how strange that transformation is. The predator approached because it wanted mice. Humans let it remain because they wanted grain. Then culture stepped in and changed the relationship again. Utility opened the door. Symbolism invited the cat inside. And then the arrangement reversed. At first, humans benefited from the cat's protection. Later, humans began protecting the cat. Why protect the protector? Because once an animal enters your stories, it becomes harder to see it as nothing more than equipment. It picks up meaning. It becomes connected to the home, to family, to the gods, and to the hope that chaos can be kept outside. The wildcat had not abandoned its instincts. Humans had simply given those instincts a new meaning. The claws used to kill rodents became symbols of defense. The stillness of an ambush hunter began to look like calm domestic presence. The animal once tolerated beside the granary entered art, ritual, memory, and belief. Not because humans had designed a cat from scratch, because humans had reinterpreted the animal already standing in front of them. Ecology began the partnership. Culture made it personal. If you're still with me, hit subscribe because the next cat will not guard a house. It will cross an empire. Imagine a grain ship leaving a North African port sometime around the 1st century BCE. Below deck, the cargo is packed tight. Enough grain to feed thousands of people is sitting inside a wooden vessel moving across open water. But it is not alone. Mice crawl between the sacks. They chew through food, contaminate stores, reproduce during the journey, and sometimes damage the ropes, cloth, or materials the crew depends on. A sailor could lay traps, of course. He could check them again and again. Reset them, move them, hope the mice had not found another route, or he could bring aboard a hunter that worked while the crew slept. A cat needed no written orders, no training schedule, no supervisor. It could balance along narrow beams, hear movement behind timber, slip between cargo, and sit beside a hole longer than any human guard would stay awake. Quiet, mobile, self-directed. The exact independence that made cats difficult to command made them almost perfect for life aboard a ship. Dogs could follow orders, but dogs were not built to vanish between grain sacks and stalk prey in darkness. Larger predators could kill mice too, but no captain with sound judgment wanted a fox or a wild mustelid running loose below deck. The cat fit, small enough to transport, tolerant enough to stay near humans, wild enough to keep working without supervision. And ships changed the scale of everything. A partnership inside one village could spread only as far as an animal walked, wandered, or reproduced. Put that same animal aboard a ship, and it could cross hundreds of kilometers in a single voyage. Ports connected ports, markets connected cities, roads connected forts. Armies carried supplies, and supplies carried rodents. Where the grain went, the mice went. Where the mice went, cats had a reason to follow. By the Roman period, these animals were no longer tied to one river valley, one climate, or one farming tradition. They moved through the infrastructure of empire aboard ships, down roads, inside military supply systems, and into settlements where local wildlife had never encountered this particular hunter. At the Roman fort of Mautern, near the Danube in present-day Austria, genetic evidence places one of the earliest confirmed domestic cats in Europe between roughly 50 BCE and 80 CE. Consider where that is. Far from the warm landscapes of North Africa, a cat was now living near Roman soldiers, warehouses, merchants, and the northern edge of imperial power. It did not walk that entire distance on its own. Human networks carried it. Not kings. Cargo. Not conquest alone. Logistics. Rome did not need an official policy ordering cats to spread across the empire. It needed ships carrying grain, forts storing food, roads linking settlements, and people willing to tolerate a predator that kept making itself useful. That was enough. The partnership expanded in stages. Opportunity first, acceptance second, transportation third. Cats began as opportunists around farms. In Egypt, they became protectors, household companions, and symbols. Then they stepped aboard human trade networks and became travelers. Humans did not merely keep cats. Civilization gave them roads. But before we give cats too much credit, there is a problem with this story. They were never the only animals capable of killing rodents. Owls could drop from above without making a sound. Snakes could slide through openings too narrow for paws. Weasels could chase prey into burrows and hidden spaces. Even small dogs could pursue pests through farms, courtyards, and storage buildings. So did cats single-handedly protect the granary, save agriculture, and make civilization possible? No. That version is neat, dramatic, and far too simple.
Ancient DNA is now complicating another familiar story.
The idea that modern domestic cats followed the earliest Near Eastern farmers into Europe during the Neolithic and steadily spread from there. Some bones once classified as domestic cats may have belonged to local European wildcats instead. Wait, that shifts the whole timeline. It suggests humans may have lived alongside different wild feline populations several times before the ancestors of today's house cats became widespread. One village drew leopard cats. Another tolerated local wildcats. Another carried a feline across the sea. Not one clean beginning, a series of attempts. The history of the cat is less like a straight road and more like scattered footprints, partnerships, replacements, false starts, and evidence still buried beneath the ground. The easy version goes something like this. Humans found a few wild kittens. They brought them home, trained them to catch mice, controlled their breeding, and slowly created the domestic cat. Simple. Also probably wrong. Cats were not shaped the way humans shaped sheep, cattle, or goats. Livestock could be fenced in. Humans could decide where they grazed, when they moved, and which individuals were allowed to reproduce. An early wildcat had another option. It could leave. And that changes everything. So what actually happened? Humans created the job before they created anything resembling an employee. Fields produced grain. Granaries gathered that grain into one place. Concentrated grain attracted dense populations of rodents. Those rodents created a feeding opportunity for any small predator willing to come close enough to human territory. The bolder wildcats got more food. The calmer wildcats stayed nearer to shelter. The cats that could tolerate smoke, footsteps, shouting children, barking dogs, and human eyes gained access to hunting grounds that more fearful animals avoided. Nothing needed to be planned. No command was required. No formal breeding program was required. No farmer had to understand genetics or natural selection. The selection pressure was already there. Cats that could live near people had an advantage over cats that could not. Not because they adored humans, because proximity paid. That is the deeper answer. Humans did not seize the wildcat and force it into civilization. We built an environment in which joining civilization became profitable. Then, once the arrangement existed, we multiplied its power. Ships carried cats farther than their paws could take them. Trade routes placed them beside new warehouses and grain stores. Religion turned them into symbols. Affection gave them protection even after their original work became less important. Ecology brought cats to the edge of our settlements. Culture persuaded them to remain. People often say the cat domesticated itself. There is truth in that, but only half the truth. The cat chose the opportunity. Humans built the world that made the choice worthwhile. Now look at the cat living with you. Maybe it is stretched across your keyboard while you are trying to finish something. Maybe it is watching you open a can of food, inspecting what you have served, and walking away as though you have violated a contract you were never allowed to read. Is it judging you? Possibly. Is the behavior ancient? Absolutely. Your apartment may look nothing like a clay granary, but to a cat, the basic offer is strangely familiar. Food is concentrated in one location. The temperature stays stable. Sleeping places are protected. Walls keep larger predators out. Water appears without a journey to the river. Meals arrive on schedule, or at least they are supposed to. It is the ancient granary upgraded into luxury accommodation. Your cat may never need to defend a sack of barley, but the machinery that made its ancestors useful is still running. Drag a string across the floor, and it becomes fleeing prey. Move a toy beneath a blanket, and the blanket becomes grass hiding a mouse. Let something scratch inside the wall, and the animal beside you changes instantly. The ears turn, the muscles tighten, the eyes lock onto a point you cannot see. The comfortable resident disappears. The hunter returns. The body lives in a human home.
The mind still carries the night shift.
And this is why describing a cat as a failed dog misses the entire point. Dogs entered a relationship shaped by cooperation, instruction, and coordinated action. They watched human gestures. They followed groups. They learned to work with us. Cats entered through another door. Tolerance. Opportunity. Negotiated distance. A dog seems to ask, "What are we doing together?" A cat seems to ask, "What exactly have you arranged for me?" And somehow, humans made space for both. That may be the most revealing part of the story. Our species does not transform relationships with other animals only through force, restraint, or obedience. Sometimes we alter the surroundings so completely that another species chooses our world because the rewards outweigh the risks. Your cat is not beside you because its ancestors lost a battle. It is not there because they surrendered their instincts. It is there because, generation after generation, independence and companionship stopped being opposites. The cat could remain a hunter and still sleep beside people. It could accept food and still ignore commands. It could live inside the human world without becoming entirely human-made.
That ancient bargain has never been fully canceled.
The contract still stands. So return to the clay granary after midnight. The sacks are still resting in the dark. The mouse pauses between two bites, its teeth caught against the fibers. And beneath the roof, those amber eyes are still open. No order has been spoken. No agreement has been written. No one inside that settlement understands that a relationship has just begun. One that will outlive the granary, cross oceans, enter temples, board ships, move through empires, and eventually end up asleep on your furniture. Across millions of species, humans possess a peculiar kind of power. We create artificial environments so large, so stable, and so rewarding that they become evolutionary forces in their own right. We clear forests and create fields. We gather scattered plants and stack their seeds by the ton. We build walls, roads, ships, ports, cities, and empires. Then the living world responds. Some species retreat. Some species disappear. Some learn the rules. And a few find an empty position inside the system we have built. The cat found one of those positions. Not by obeying us, by understanding the opportunity. It entered human settlements without becoming fully submissive. It accepted warmth without giving up the cold patience of a predator. It took shelter without surrendering its ability to survive alone. It lived beside us, not beneath us. Perhaps that is why the relationship still feels different from almost every other form of domestication. There is always a small distance left between the cat and the human hand. A reminder that the animal in your home was never designed entirely for your approval. Civilization does not always move forward by defeating nature. Sometimes it changes the landscape. Sometimes it creates a vacancy. Sometimes it makes an offer and nature decides the terms.
We built the walls, the ships, and the empires.
The cat saw an opening and refused to leave.
We stored the grain.
The cat guarded the future. Subscribe.